We are Arreglo Entertainment, and our podcast Arreglo Radio is a platform where we take a deeper dive into the lives and minds of young professionals in Vancouver. Through engaging and personable conversations with our guests, we gain insight into their professional expertise, ideologies, and really dissect what makes them tick. Our guests come from a wide spectrum of professions, from accountants to makeup artists, musicians to entrepreneurs. We aim to really understand and showcase what drives the next generation of business, social, and community leaders. We believe that providing a more relaxed atmosphere that feels like home, coupled with some light banter, presents the opportunity for better conversations that don't feel staged. Arreglo Entertainment is a group of former international students looking to fully understand Vancouver, its people, and culture. And coming from this perspective, we believe that we are uniquely capable of having these in-depth exploratory conversations. What's going on, good people? Welcome back to this episode of Arreglo Radio, Season 2, Episode 4. And today we're joined by Michael from MAPS. Should I say that right? Mm-hmm. All right, awesome. So, what's going on, fam?
Not too much. Stoked to be here. Excited to talk about wherever the conversation is going to take us.
Awesome.
Probably going to touch on psychedelics, so always an interesting topic.
So, I don't know a lot about psychedelics, but I am so ready for this conversation because I'm curious.
There's lots to be curious about.
Yeah. All right, but before we get into all of that chat, tell us about you as a person. What's your story?
Sure. So my story is I was born here in Burnaby, actually, and then grew up in England for about 8 years, then came back to Vancouver, where I spent most of the time I can remember here. Went to high school here, just graduated from UBC, so I did an undergrad degree in cognitive systems, which is like a mix of psychology, linguistics, philosophy, and computer science, kind of like a mixture of those four, and you specialize in one. So I specialize in psychology, so my academic background, I suppose, is focused on psychology. But outside of that, I'd say I'm a fairly, I love outdoor stuff. I'm a very active person. Love running, biking, kayaking, rock climbing, a lot of the outdoor activities that you can find people doing here in Vancouver. Yeah. We're so blessed to have so many awesome outdoor activities and outlets here. So try and take advantage of that as much as I can. I also lifeguard in the summer. What else do I do? I love to play music as well. I'd say music is also one of my biggest passions. So I've been in a couple of bands and play guitar. And I play neo-soul music. It's kind of like R&B and rock kind of fused together. That's the type of music that I enjoy to play the most. But I like all types of music, like classical, jazz, classic rock, EDM, everything. It's all amazing to me.
Yeah. Dude! Wow. You're weirdly well-rounded. this is weird.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
But actually, really impressive. Really
Thank you.
Impressive, really
impressive. I appreciate that.
So, how did you end up working with MAPS? And what is MAPS? Just to
sure.
Get a baseline.
Yeah. So to start, what is MAPS? MAPS is an acronym. It stands for the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and they're a nonprofit charity that's been around for quite a while. So they're actually one of the longest-standing psychedelic organizations. They were founded in 1968 in the US. And so I actually work for MAPS Canada, which is kind of like a separate arm to MAPS US, and that started in 2011. So MAPS Canada is a bit newer, but they have we share the same goal, which is basically to try and provide safe access to psychedelics for everyone that needs them. And when we talk about safe access to psychedelics here in this context, we're talking about psychedelics as medicines. So we're talking about providing safe access to psychedelic medicines to everyone who needs them, and that's kind of the main focus of MAPS, I'd say. And MAPS itself actually it has a pretty narrow niche. In some ways, most of its work has been focused on MDMA and how ecstasy or MDMA can be used to treat PTSD. But at the same time, because MAPS is kind of this, it's a well-rounded organization. It's been around for so long. It also plays a lot of advocacy roles. So it also, it educates on all sorts of psychedelics. So it's not just MDMA that MAPS kind of is involved with. But anyways, that's kind of a little bit of an overview of what MAPS is. Yeah. And I can share, if you want, how I kind of got into it. Yeah. So I actually started I'd say at UBC during my degree. I actually met a few folks who were running a club at UBC called the UBC Psychedelic Society. So there's actually like a student approved, like an AMS approved club. And I started kind of volunteering with them, and I actually ended up kind of leading that society for a couple of years. And during that time, the last 2 to 3 years of my undergrad, I actually met some people that were part of MAPS Canada at UBC, and then I started volunteering with them. And so I volunteered with MAPS Canada for about 4 months. It's pretty much an entirely volunteer-run organization. There's only 2 staff, and so I was one of those volunteers. Yeah. And then after a couple months, someone who had the position before me was transitioning away. So I applied, and then a couple months later, I got the job. And so I spent the last year of my undergrad working half-time for MAPS while finishing my degree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that pretty much like started right from the onset.
Yeah. After my degree, I was really lucky. It was nice. It was like 20 hours a week right when I was finishing my last year. So I was able, it was like an easy in that way transition out of university because I already had the job while I was finishing my degree. So that was interesting, definitely challenging at times because it was like taking on some new responsibilities and new work while I was already, facing some of the responsibilities of finishing a degree and all that. But I'm super grateful. Yeah, uni does suck at times. I think.
Is rough.
Yeah, uni is rough. It is rough at times for sure. But I feel like I'm also like really grateful for the challenges because I mean that's why you put yourself through that, right? Is to learn something, get something out of it, and hopefully come out more prepared on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so psychedelics in like colloquial. Sorry about that. But like, okay, so psychedelics in like general society.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misinformation. There's a whole lot of
Stigma.
ooga booga. Like
Yeah.
let's just call it ooga booga bullshit. Yeah.
Lots of ooga booga bullshit.
Right. So when it comes to like the history of psychedelics, it's pretty checkered. But I read somewhere that psychedelics go back to like a lot of like traditional cultures, right? So like now, so it's like how, like, why the transition away from like something that was used a lot in like a lot of like traditional cultures to like what we have right now? Like, is it just because of like what happened in the States and they're like anti-drugs, or is there like something else? Like, because I don't know a whole lot about it. Like, I just know what I read online, but it's like,
right. Yeah.
it's the internet.
I feel like you're speaking to something really interesting. So you're kind of pointing to the fact that like psychedelics were used in indigenous groups and like ceremonially in other cultures, but then now we don't really look at them as medicines. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like what happened there? Yeah, I think there's like lots of things to point to. I mean, you actually spoke to it earlier today. You were talking about the Ronald Reagan era of the drug war. And so I think that's one thing that we could point to, like, like in the 50s, 60s, 70s. I'd say more so like, in the 70s, the political climate in the US, there's lots that can be traced back to there, because a lot of the research around some of these synthetic chemicals like LSD or MDMA, that was, a lot of it was kind of originated in the US. A lot of really great work was being done there. And it was actually being studied to be used as a medicine in psychiatry. Like a lot of psychiatrists were like experimenting with these things, trying it on people. The military was also trying it on people. I don't know if you've heard of MK Ultra, but it's like this top secret CIA, I think it was CIA mission to basically like use LSD as like a brain control tool. Sounds kind of crazy, like, and I don't know all the details, but seriously, like, you look it up, it's like this, they revealed all the documents about it. It's really crazy. Like military test, basically, looking at how to use LSD as almost as a weapon, like trying to figure out how to weaponize it. So anyways, there was all this crazy stuff going on in that time. And so, yes, I think there's lots to be said about how there seems to have been a kind of like an iron curtain that fell, in the sense that all these drugs were made illegal and they were kind of cast aside as drugs that would cause harm. And they were put in the same class as a lot of other drugs like heroin and crystal meth and all these drugs that we can probably agree are bad drugs, or maybe like don't serve as much of a therapeutic purpose. But yeah, all that to say, I'd also say that it actually was kind of there's a bigger transition that was taking place, really, which was just the movement of our cultures away from, or towards materialism. And like when you think about back in the day, you were talking about like all these older cultures using psychedelics. A lot of the time in those cultures there would be people called shamans, right? So these are people in the community that were trusted to use these substances in a beneficial way. They were trusted to navigate the psychedelic headspace and then take whatever they learned from their journeys and everything they were encountering and then bring that back to the community, integrate it, use it to heal others. So psychedelics, as you were alluded to, were seen as like a legitimate form of healing. But I think to answer your question, what happened was over time we've relied a lot more now on materialist science. So we kind of we shy away from all of that stuff and we kind of label it as what's the right word? It's, you know, it's not scientific. It's a little woo woo wah wah. It's like it's antiquated. Yeah, it's antiquated. It's like sorcery. It's I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but it's superstitious, right? Because back in the old days, what was happening is we had, you know, a lot of people saw the world in terms of spirits, and you know, if you were sick, it wasn't because you had an infection, right? Before we discovered the microscope and germs and theory, it was just like you're possessed or you have a spirit or something, right? Back in the day when these cultures were using these things. So I think the transition from that immaterial science to what we now have has led us to rely on more westernized models of medication and healing, right? Which is what we have today is pharmaceuticals, all these drugs that are made in labs. Like we have a very materialistic view on health. It's like you have this problem in your brain and it's because of these chemicals, so we're going to try and alter these chemicals and give you an SSRI, for example, that's going to treat your depression and it's going to balance out your chemicals because that's what's wrong with you. It's nothing to do with the spirit or anything. It's just your physical imbalance of chemicals in your brain. So anyways, I hope that kind of
for sure
speaks to some of what you're getting at.
For sure, absolutely. And you actually touched on kind of like the next question that I was going to ask anyway.
Okay.
So my next question then becomes, it's like fighting the stigma around sort of the demonization and like the social ostracization, big word, of psychedelics. And there's been a pretty significant movement. I think the first time that I realized that psychedelics would be more readily acceptable was actually, weirdly enough, a Vice documentary. And I can't remember the name of this dude, but like he had an entire series with Vice Media where he would try different psychedelics in each episode. And his experiences were interesting because he just said, like, if these drugs are handled the right way, like you run the risk of like potentially horrific outcomes if you're predisposed to them. But you know, like for the average person that's in like a good headspace that has someone walking them through it, it's actually a good thing. So is that the way to combat stigma? Just like expose people to them like more readily and try to like put some of the fears away, or is there another way?
I think there's lots of ways, and I think they all kind of run in parallel, and it's the same for other things too. Like we can look back in history and see a lot of things that have kind of come into the sphere, and at first people kind of push it back, but then later on they adopt it. There's probably tons of examples, but in the case of psychedelics, like I think there's multiple ways to combat it, right? I think the foundation though is science. It's which is kind of what we were speaking to, which is the good thing about transitioning to like more materialist science is that we have these robust studies, right? So you're more likely to trust a medicine to be effective if you know it's been studied, right? Or it's been like tested. So like having that strong body of research across the world, where a lot of people are starting to work on now, like it's not just the US, it's the UK. There's lots of consciousness centers popping up. For example, there's the Imperial Institute. I think it's the Imperial Institute of Brain and Consciousness Research. They're really dedicated to psychedelic research. And there's also like John Hopkins University. A lot of these universities around the world are really putting a lot of effort and time into it. So I'd say that's a really important thing, is having the science. But then also just like maybe another important thing is having people share their story,
right.
Like, and not be afraid to do that. Like I know quite a few people who have taken a psychedelic, for example, and they've had a really amazing experience. And the unfortunate thing about all the stigma is that someone can have this amazing healing experience, which can be very meaningful for them, but then they turn back to their family or to their friends and their culture, and it's like, well, this is illegal, and I can't really share this because I'm afraid I'm going to be stigmatized, right? So that's what stigma does, is it like silences people. So people have these amazing experiences, but they can't really legitimize them because they're worried that they're going to be ostracized, or they're worried that they're going to be seen as a druggie or something, right? There's tons of labels and all this comes up. So I think this is changing now. Like, I know for myself personally, like, I don't have any of those fears anymore because I know that these things are legitimate medicines, and that everything that most of what's been told to us and to society about them is actually kind of incorrect and not really based on any science. But yeah, I would encourage a great way to get rid of the stigma is for people to be more open and share about their experiences. And I think that's leading to what we're seeing now, which is like the New York Times just posted about psychedelic therapy like in the last couple of weeks. I think over the last 4 weeks they posted twice. Psychedelics made, I don't know if it was the front page, but Maps actually was in the New York Times, and so that's a big major mainstream publication, right? That's like speaking to this. So I think it's just a matter of time now. The ball is starting to roll and the stigma is starting to go away.
For sure.
Yeah.
So then, when it comes to like sort of like the mainstream adoption of psychedelics, like, what's the biggest challenge that you foresee?
That's a really good question. I feel like one challenge is going to be access. Like, who gets access to these medicines? They're going to be kind of expensive when you look at it in terms of pairing it with psychotherapy. So MAPS, that I spoke to, the organization, like I mentioned, they're focusing on MDMA research. And so what they're focused on is actually not just giving someone MDMA and like stepping back and letting them do their thing, but it's the magic comes from the combination of the drug and then the therapy. So, and it happens at the same time. So you have drug, it's MDMA assisted psychotherapy. That's the name of the treatment that MAPS is focused on. And so that as a treatment model is really interesting. It's very effective, but it also is very expensive because, you know, if you have two therapists that are there guiding you through your journey, like you need to pay those therapists, you need to pay for the space, like all the costs add up, right? And so I see one problem being trying to make that model more affordable, because it would be kind of unfair if, you know, who's going to be able to pay $4,000 to a treatment for that, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that's exactly what it's going to be, but it's in the range, like it's going to be up there. You know, I don't think we actually know yet, not specifically what the actual cost will be. We can only estimate at the moment, but even with other therapies, like right now in Canada, you can actually get ketamine assisted psychotherapy, and that's legal. So you can actually, in Toronto, there's a couple clinics. I think in Vancouver, there's a company called Numinous here, which is focused on that. So that's kind of a psychedelic, and again, it's expensive treatment. So I'd say one of the problems is access, and the other is it's just misinformation still. Like, although I've noted that like it seems like we're going in the right direction, like a lot of the information is changing. A lot of people are like starting to say, oh yeah, psychedelics actually, I heard that they're actually considered medicines or whatever. But nonetheless, it's just hard to, after you've had decades of misinformation and people being told stories about every drug is bad, don't ever do drugs, you know, all these government programs, DARE, all these things, like it's a lot of programming that is really hard to undo.
Just say no, right?
Exactly, just say no to everything. It's like, okay, but like, what about coffee? Coffee's a drug, but like, how do we distinguish these? And the coffee is honestly kind of a crazy drug if you don't drink that much of it. And like cannabis, alcohol is a really crazy drug. Like alcohol kills,
powerful drug.
It's a really powerful drug, and it like, it's fun, but it also kills like millions of people a year.
Yeah. So
whereas psychedelics, like no one's ever died from mushrooms or LSD, and that's facts.
Ooh. You just dug into your own bag of facts. Facts. I like that still. All right. So let's see. I'm kind of like fixated on this like cost thing, right? Because then the question then becomes, it's like, so who's gonna have access to it, right? Because let's be honest, the average person in any advanced society is not gonna have that much money out of pocket.
No.
Particularly if they're suffering from PTSD or they have like some other condition that requires this particular type of therapy, or this therapy could be beneficial. So now the question then becomes, it's like, how equitable is it then?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think, you know, some of it comes down to like there will be insurance. Like if people have health coverage, like this is something that would be able to be covered under that. So there is like, you know, there's some progress there, and that at least we can look towards initiatives like that. Like we can have faith in our existing healthcare system to hopefully be able to integrate this. But it's tricky.
It's like, because it's like, if you really think about it, like any new therapy is going to have most insurers a little wary of it.
Right.
But I mean, like in Canada it's a little bit different because there is like a public health system. Like Canada does have a single payer system, but I'm thinking about places like the States, which is like in terms of like drugs is the global policy leader.
Right.
So it's like if the US, which is, for lack of a better term, backward when it comes to like drug policy enforcement. I mean, recently they've changed because they've legalized cannabis in I don't know how many states now.
Yeah.
But they don't have a single payer healthcare system. And it's like, given how expensive this therapy could potentially be, it's like, how feasible is it? Because again, like, if we're talking about PTSD specifically, right? Like, the people that are most likely going to need it are most likely veterans.
Yeah.
And it's like, the Department of Veterans Affairs in the US is notorious for like cost cutting. So it's like, I'm hearing this and it sounds beautiful and it sounds awesome, but it's like in the back of my mind, I can't help but think there's going to be an equitable access issue here, right?
Yeah, no, there for sure will. And like one thing I can throw in the conversation as like an idea and maybe like part of the solution, I think, which I do think will help, is the underground scene. And so, like the therapies that we've been talking about briefly here, like these are the ones that are going to be like prescribed by your doctor. You know, like you're going to go to probably a really nice clinic and have the setting. But like, I don't know about yourself, but like personally, like with my own personal psychedelic experiences that I've had in my life, I've never gone to a clinic or had a therapist or do any of that. Like I've done them with my friends or by myself in nature, in trees, in Squamish, or like around the beautiful wilderness that we have.
Did you say in trees?
Like within trees, like in the forest. Yeah, sometimes in trees.
Such a hippie.
I know, I am. I have hippie roots for sure. But like I think we can learn from the hippies. I think we can. I mean,
agree.
like for like the movement, like a lot of the psychedelic movement started with the hippies in a way, right? Like the counterculture, and that's a lot of like when that emerged, you know, with Woodstock and the Flower Children and I don't know, all that whole 70s movement, like that's what was suppressed by Nixon. It was
boomers became boomers.
Exactly. But I really do think that whether you want to use it in the trees or you want to use it in your basement suite or you want to use it in your pool, like whatever access you have to a space, whatever that looks like for you, I think there's ways that we can encourage people to empower themselves to heal with these things. I don't think we need like, it's hard because on the one hand, I do think we need like proper implementation and we need standardization and things like this will help, and especially when you're dealing with complex symptoms or complex illnesses like PTSD and people that have treatment resistant depression and treatment resistant PTSD, then the services that MAPS is offering, for example, are going to be great. But for your everyday Joe, let's say, that could still benefit from these medicines, and I think everyone to some extent can heal themselves in certain ways. Like we all have things that we're dealing with, right? And we can all whether it's you label it like spiritual development or personal development or self-actualization, like a lot of people like are interested in growing them personally, right? And overcoming their own mental things. And so all I would say there is just like the point I'm trying to make is there's actually a really rich underground movement in many cities around the world. And actually Vancouver, we're really lucky. We actually are a hub for a lot of psychedelic work, and there's actually a very thriving underground community here. And when I say underground community, I just mean people that are facilitating journeys under their own like in their own way. You know, they're not necessarily reporting to any college or group. They have their own method. They're indigenous people that have their own lineage, and they're trying to pass that on to others through their healing work. Maybe it's counselors or registered clinical counselors that have like on the front they're doing regular registered clinical counseling, but actually under the table they're offering psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So I think that offers a really big solution, because then you can do things like, for example, I know in Vancouver there's people that will host psilocybin journeys, so magic mushroom journeys, for 12 people at once, and that brings the cost down tremendously, because what we're talking about before was
individual.
one person with 2 therapists.
Yeah.
But now think about 2 therapists with 12 or 15 people.
Yeah.
Now it's like a couple $100 a person,
Right.
which is a lot more accessible, right? And yeah, so that's actually something I'm really interested and passionate about. And on the side, actually, I started this business, the Flying Sage, like back a year and a half ago, and it started as like a clothing thing, but I'm actually transitioning it now to be more focused on underground therapy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's something that I'm really hoping to. I'm just in the early stages of it, but I'm really hoping to transition there.
No, for sure. So we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
Because I really want to like actually like hear about that. But
Sure.
just like go back to this thing.
Yeah.
Because on this safety concerns then.
Yeah.
Because they're not regulated
Mm-hmm.
and like you don't know what the testing protocols are. Because it's like you hear horror stories of people like popping Molly that's been cut with XYZ or whatever, or they get like mushrooms that have been like sprinkled with something or whatever. Then it's like the underground scene, from what you're describing, it sounds brilliant, to be honest. But in the back of my mind, like I can't help but think that there might be some nefarious actors that are just in it to make a quick buck, and they're gonna like tinker with their product, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, so people that have that concern, it's like, are there any safeguards within the community to counteract that, or is there a way to get the stuff you're buying tested? Like, what safety like pressure valves are there?
That's such a good question, because that is a big problem with the underground scene, is that there are risk factors. I mean, at the end of the day, it's illegal to be doing this type of work, right? So, I mean, there's risks for the people who are actually doing the work as well, like people who are wanting to facilitate or guide journeys. They're putting themselves at risk because they're technically not allowed to do that. The people that are buying that psychedelics themselves are putting themselves at risk. So there's a risk there, just in the sense that it's illegal. But you speak to a good point about like accessing substances and nefarious actors, and I think that's definitely true. Like, and I think with like almost anything, you'll have, I think it's like a normal distribution. You'll probably have the majority of people in the middle that offer a good service at a good price with good knowledge. But then you'll have on the high end, you'll have a fewer select guides that have been maybe around for longer. They have a lot of rich experience, they have wisdom, and they have the skills to actually offer a really incredible experience, and that might be a bit more expensive. But then as you alluded to, you have the people on the other end of the spectrum, which are maybe coming into it, maybe they're not even like trying to be nefarious. They're not even trying to do anything wrong, but just from from ignorance, they're hurting people. And I think that's what we are seeing. Some people will come into the space and they will maybe not be as skilled as they purport to be, or they will just come in and not really treat it as seriously as it is. And so, like, you have to remember, these are really powerful medicines, and so they deserve a lot of respect, and they deserve a lot of care and attention put into the process of healing someone with these things. And there are people that can come in and they don't necessarily see it that way, and they might end up actually damaging people more, right? So you're totally right. And there's no college to report to. There's no government official or organization that's really managing all of that. But I think what we can, like, one of the safety valves we have is community in a way. I think we can start to look towards all these different people in the underground that are doing this work, and we can hold each other accountable to some extent. I think there are groups, people hear things right through the grapevine, and like at the end of the day, the Vancouver, as just an example, the Vancouver psychedelic community is a community, and it's like in that community we try and hold each other up, we try and lift each other up. And I think that's a great thing about the underground community, is like there's Facebook pages and signal groups, and people like talk and communicate best practices. There's manuals as well. So my boss, or ex-boss now, he stepped down from MAPS Canada, but he actually wrote one of the world's first like manual for psychedelic guides. So it literally tells you all the things you need to know about how to do this work effectively. So
really?
Yeah, that's like a really great resource if anyone's interested in learning how to do this kind of work, or just curious about what it would look like. That's a really great resource.
And is the resource publicly available?
It is, yeah. So it's on the MAPS Canada website. It's on Amazon. You can buy it for like $10. It's really cheap. All the money goes back to psychedelic research.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's a really good resource.
Right. Awesome. Well, again, so the only reason why I'm kind of like thinking about safety is just, I guess, to go back to the issue of like stigma, like potential government policy, right?
Yeah.
Because politicians will politic, right?
Yes.
And the easiest ticket to sell is one of fear. Like, I will protect you from XYZ, this, that, the third, yada, yada, yada. We all know this. We've all seen it. I mean, man like Donny T became president off of the US on a ticket of fear, right? So, fear, like, so fear works. So, like, what kind of, like, advocacy work is MAPS doing with the government? Because I'm assuming that some advocacy work is being done in an attempt to either, like, allow, like, further research to, I guess, move the needle a little bit towards, like, more acceptance. Right?
Yeah, no, so MAPS does do that, and that's one of the unique things about it. I mean, it's because it's been around for so long, it kind of has naturally been starting to play more of this advocacy role.
Right.
People do see MAPS as like an authority in the space now,
Right.
and so people do come to MAPS in that regard. So, I mean, I can speak a little bit to MAPS Canada and the work that we do. Like, we have I mentioned we're all volunteer run, basically. We have like 60 volunteers across, 60 to 100 volunteers across Vancouver and Toronto, and within that group we have a drug policy committee. So that committee is really focused on like the legal side of things. They actually communicate directly with Health Canada and some of the government bodies here in Vancouver, municipally, in BC, and federally. And so there has been like engagement happening, and so and it's actually been really nice to see, like, over the course of the last year and a half to 2 years. I have noticed, and we've noticed as a community, as an organization, like people like the health minister reaching out directly to MAPS to be like, hey, we're looking to understand psychedelics more. Like, there's the potential that we want to integrate this into our healthcare system.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So Mark Hayden, the previous executive director and the person who started MAPS Canada and who had been running it for 10 years, he was very excited one day when he got a message from, I believe it was the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, and she was like, hey, like, we need some help. We want to learn more about psychedelics. Can you please join our steering committee or advisory committee to help us implement this? So on the government level, I know that on federal, municipal, provincial, like, they're talking about it. People see it now. There's been petitions. There's been rallies. There was this decriminalized nature petition, which was this basically a notice that was going to be read in the House of Commons, and we sent it out and blasted it across Canada and social media, and they've got thousands and thousands of signatures, people supporting it.
Right.
And there's lots of initiatives like that going on elsewhere, right? So yeah, to answer your question, like MAPS, it definitely has certain facets of the organization are really dedicated to that aspect, like interfacing with government and trying our best to be there as like the expert, like as people that are looking at this from a public health perspective and ultimately just a health perspective, because a lot of the time the war on drugs and all this has been kind of seen from a criminal lens, right? You know, drugs are seen through a criminal lens.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, like, you know, even if you look here in Vancouver, like downtown, in the downtown east side, you know, a lot of the trouble that we see there with drugs, like more like opioid problems, like the opioid crisis that we're going through, a terrible stage for any city or province to be in. But like a lot of that is fueled by this lens that we have, which is looking at drugs from this criminal lens. And that started all the way back with the war on drugs, right? But like, what if we actually turned and looked at it as a health crisis, you know, and like look at these people as not necessarily criminals who are like purposely trying to go out of their way to defy the law and take these drugs, but more like people that need help. They're using this as a last resort. There's potential to heal. Anyways, that kind of diverges from your question.
Nah, dude, have at it. Because again, we just want an organic chat.
Yeah.
It's just you and me right now. Pretend the camera's not there. Hi, mom. But just like pretend the camera's not even there. Like, it's all good. See, so that actually brings up a pretty interesting point then, because I don't know how true this is, but I think it was Portugal that decriminalized all drugs.
Yes. Yeah, they might have even legalized all drugs.
Say what now?
Yeah, they might have. I should know this, but I think, yeah, they either decriminalize or legalize all substances. And apparently what I do know is that, you know, they've been looking at the results of that, and apparently it's been really great. Like the incarceration rates have gone down, I believe.
Right. I mean, that should be a given, right?
Well, that should be a given, yeah. If people aren't being arrested for these things.
Yeah.
But I believe like some significant measures have been going up too, like just like less homelessness, less health issues as well with drugs, like less people being admitted to hospitals under the influence. I think it's created a more safe environment for people to use substances, and so I think at the end of the day, people might even be using less substances. It's kind of paradoxical, but I think that's what they're seeing.
Oh, you know that thing, like when you're like a teenager, 14,
Yeah.
15, and then your parents are like, you can't have a beer, but it's like you really want that beer. It's like you can't have a beer, like, but you really want that beer, not because you want the beer, but because your parents said no.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe that's what's happening.
I think there's part of that there. Yeah, for sure. I'd want to look into it more. So don't quote me on any of that.
Free flowing conversation. Like we're not gonna like hold you to task because I don't know anything about. Because literally, I just like it just popped into my head. I'm like, I read a headline and like a news article about.
Yeah,
it, like,
no, you're totally right.
Like 2-3 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is. I wasn't expecting that, but it's not like it makes sense though, because for me, like the thing that always made me feel uneasy about drug policy is how implicitly like biased it is against specific people. Like just the way that like drug law is written, it's like it ignores all of the contributing factors. Like it's essentially like putting a band-aid over a stab wound. You're like, oh shit, you got stabbed. Alright, cool. So like, let's just like stop the bleeding. But it's like you're not even gonna like see if there's any like internal bleeding, like how deep the blade went. Like you're not even gonna like try and stitch stuff together. It just goes, oh, band-aid. It's like I don't know. It never sat right with me.
Yeah.
And then
Totally.
obviously like when Reagan's drug czar's assistant came and said, no, the war on drugs was like explicitly a race thing, and I'm like, see, dickhead. I could see. All right, so moving away from that, let's talk about your small business.
Okay.
Tell us about it. Let's get into it.
Absolutely. So I started this business in February of 2020 with my sister. Yeah, it's called The Flying Sage. So the idea behind it is it started as a psychedelic. It's essentially a psychedelic drop shipping streetwear brand. So it's
I have
a
to say this though.
Yeah?
Flying Sage is probably one of the dopest names I've heard in
Yeah?
a while.
yeah. Oh, that's sweet. I
Raw.
appreciate that.
Raw. Like I can't even lie. Like when I think Flying Sage, like I just like picture like a dude in like robes, like sitting on a cloud, like
Yes.
meditating, just going, yeah.
I'm so glad that you picture that and not a piece of like herb. Because you know there's the sage, like people burn sage.
Dude, I don't pray to crystals. I think that shit's weird. I don't pray to crystals. And I know that I'm going to get some flack for that because some of my best friends are like, crystals. I'm like,
I know, my crystals aren't charged. That's why I'm not feeling good today. It's either that or it's the full moon.
oh, dude, let's not even get into that, man.
Yeah. No offense to anyone out there that
See,
vibes that way. That's all. It's
hey,
different
look,
strokes for different folks.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if that's your speed, that's your speed. But like, tutus, you're goofy for it. Like, tutus, like, you're kind of goofy for it. But anyway, Flying Sage.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you picture that because that's exactly what I want. The image I want to instill is like a wise sage. Because for anyone that doesn't know, like a sage is an herb and people do burn it, but sage is also in philosophy defined as someone who's attained wisdom. Yeah. And so the whole idea behind the flying sage is that it's someone that's attained wisdom from flying high because they took psychedelics. So they've attained wisdom from exactly. They've attained wisdom from using psilocybin or LSD or just any sort of psychedelic substance, and
they're flying because
they're flying.
On wisdom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You should rap, yo.
I wish I could. Maybe we'll get there.
You should drop a mixtape, a neo soul mixtape. That should be dope.
Give me a few years, it'll happen. Yeah.
All right. So sorry.
No worries.
I keep jumping in. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Flying Sage.
Yeah, so that was kind of the idea behind it, and then it started as this, like I mentioned, like a streetwear brand. So the kind of goal with that is to like, it's essentially to speak to what we've already been talking about today, which is to help get rid of the stigma, because I think a lot of time their clothing says a lot about them, and people like to represent what they are about with their clothes, and so I wanted to create some streetwear that allowed people to show discreetly and kind of subtly that they use psychedelics for personal growth. And I think what I noticed coming into it was like if you looked up psychedelic clothing on Google or just even thought about psychedelic clothing, a lot of the time you would get like tie-dye images, and you get all the hippie clothing, right, and robes and like.
I'm happy you said that because like I thought you were gonna put out some like tie-dye shit, and I'm like,
no,
that's not streetwear.
No, it's not. It's not. So that's what I've been wanting to do, is I wanted to take the essence of the psychedelic movement and what we could maybe call the psychedelic renaissance, which is happening now the last couple of years. The psychedelic renaissance, trying to take the spirit of that, which is like these are amazing tools that anyone and everyone can benefit from if you use in the proper way. And like I personally benefited so much from them. I wanted to allow people to represent that with their clothing, so you can check it out. Like the designs are a lot more like modern and sophisticated, so there's no tie-dye at all. No tie-dye. There will never be any tie-dye.
For me, tie-dye is goofy as shit. I don't like it.
Yeah, no, I
can't. I don't like it. I don't like it.
I think some people can rock it, but like
nah, dog. Nah, dog. To me, tie-dye is shit across the board. It's shit across the board. Because here's the thing, yeah. Some of my prejudice is about to jump out.
Yeah.
But I don't give a fuck.
No.
I'm gonna say with my
let him fly.
See, you're so supportive. I appreciate you, Michael. I appreciate you. So, whenever I see tie-dye, right, the only thing that I can, like, the only thing I picture, right, is some white girl named Brittany with dreadlocks wearing, like, you know those, like, super baggy, like, tight pants that are, like, super thin? I think they're made out of linen.
Yeah.
Those things, like, they look like they belong on the genie from fucking Aladdin. Like those baggy things, like a weird, like elephant design on them. And it's like Britney's like walking around and like she's wearing like this like weird like tie-dye shirt that's like, it looks like it has been washed in like 3-4 days. And I'm like, wash your hair, Britney.
Come on.
Just fucking wash your hair. It's like, why are you doing this to yourself? Your locks look dumb. You look dumb. You look dumb.
Come on, Brittany.
Like, but that's
do
just
the right
my
thing.
Prejudice. but that's just my prejudice because I'm like, I have locks and like,
right.
I work to keep these locks clean because like locks are associated with Rastafarianism, which in common society is seen as this like backward thing. It's like, it's really not. It's just a religious, like, it's just religion. But like, I'm not a Rastafarian. It's like, but this just so happens the way that my hair grows. And it's like, I don't want people looking at me funny. It's like, yo, my man's hair smells funky still. It's like, so like, I keep my shit clean. It's like I do my hairline and that. Fucking Britney's walking out here. She's got like this much growth. And she's got like 17 different colors in her locks. She's got like 17 locks. 17, not 70, 17. These big jumbo fucking things. And I'm like,
Brittany,
why?
Come on.
Why? You're fucking it up for everyone. But that's just my prejudice.
It's okay. We all have those.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's fine. But I'm super excited. You know, I'm actually going to check out like Flying Sage as soon as we're done because I'm fascinated to see what you guys have.
Yeah, absolutely. No, check it out. So, I can show you some stuff.
Do you already have product out? Yeah,
so we have had product out now for a while. We put a collection out a while ago. It's been a while since we released a new design. I think the last one was a couple months ago. Okay. I was actually thinking about that recently. It would be a good idea to get a summer collection or just a couple designs out. But I'm happy with what we have up there right now. Like I wanted to get a solid base, and I think right now we have quite a few really like great products I'm actually really happy about, and like I look at and I'm still like, those are great, and I'm happy to like have those there. And so I want to continue to grow that, but then my focus kind of shifted then to more of the back end, like with marketing and Facebook ads and trying to like do the whole e-commerce thing. And so that's been interesting. It's been definitely a learning experience, and it's been going up. I think things have been fairly steady, but it's also been challenging because like I've been mostly focused on maps, like that's my full-time work. So it's more of a side hustle at the moment, the Flying Sage. But all that being said, like I've been really excited because the last, I'd say since October, I have actually been trying to step into more of that underground space myself, with facilitating journeys for people. After doing it initially with my friends earlier on in my life, but then stepping into a couple opportunities for healing others, and just finding it to be something that just felt right. Like it felt like I was meant to do it in some ways, you know, and the results on both ends from the people I was working with and also on my end, like, were really great. And so I just kept doing that on the side. And then in the last month or so, I've kind of been looking at the Flying Sage and being like, well, ultimately what I really love to do and what I've been also doing with MAPS is like community building. That's something I really like to do. And I think at the heart of a lot of strong brands and businesses is this community of people. And what I really want to do with the Flying Sage is transition it now to be a community of people that are empowering one another to heal through psychedelics. And so, and a big part of that, the inspiration behind that is to alleviate that issue of access that we were talking about. Because I work for MAPS, right? And I see the direction that's going, and I definitely see it being beneficial for a certain group of people. And it's great work that they've been doing. Like, honestly, like Rick Doblin, who founded MAPS, like the whole legacy that he's building with that is quite incredible. But at the same time, there are drawbacks. And so I want to try and identify some of those with the Flying Sage, and just basically create a community where anyone can come in, meet like-minded people that are interested in using psychedelics productively, and then learn alongside them, if they want, how to actually sit for their friends. And if they don't want to necessarily learn how to sit, they can actually find people who will sit for them. Basically, I want to create a community that's like anyone can kind of come in and they can find people that they would like to maybe do some psychedelic integration work with, or maybe do an actual journey with. And at the end of the day, just like create a community of people that are both all in it together to try and learn how to support others and hold space for others in a psychedelic way. So I guess in a sense it's like harm reduction, trying to learn how to hold space for your friend better. Because, like, you know, a lot of people have had the experience of their friend being like, hey, can you just watch out for me while I do this drug? You know, like some people, like they'll want to have a trip sitter. And that's a great thing that you can do if you want to have a psychedelic experience and have a safe psychedelic experience at home. One of the greatest things you can do is have someone there that you trust to look out for you. And that's great, but, you know, sometimes it can be very challenging with the stuff that comes up in a psychedelic experience. If your friend's there, they're just looking after you. There's things that you can say and things that you can't say that can really affect their journey too. Like, a lot of people don't realize, like, if they're saying certain things to a friend while they're in this really vulnerable state, it could actually have really negative consequences. So I want to try and help that and make it easier for people to know what to do in those situations.
Right.
Yeah.
That is wild. Fascinating. So before we wrap.
Yes.
So from what I'm hearing, like, you're very much heavily in this community, and you're well versed in like sort of like what the community is doing and like how the policy kind of component is going and everything else like that. So as someone from the outside that knows little to nothing about it, that if you had like 2 to 3 minutes of their time and you're trying to like convince them or to tell them that, look, Reagan is full of shit, essentially, like, how would you go about it?
It's a great question. I mean, I like to hope that I could just bring out some scientific papers and kind of point to some of the evidence that is supporting a lot of what's being done with the psychedelic renaissance. But, you know, it depends who you're talking to. Some people don't really sway well with reason and science, and I think for those people it's tough, and there's not much you can do for people that don't want to listen to the science and reason and that not. But yeah, I mean, I would just point to a lot of the research that's done, in particular with Johns Hopkins. Like, they were studying psilocybin for depression, and the results are just incredible, like showing the turnaround rate and the amount of people that are really benefiting and being healed by these things. I would really just try and share that with them. And honestly, I'd probably just speak to my own experience too, and just note, like, these are things that I've personally used for quite a while, and they've had a really, I think, lasting impact on me, and impacted the way that I see the world. And I would maybe hope to try and eliminate that in my conversation too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So where can people find the Flying Sage, MAPS, or if you want to plug yourself, go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, so MAPS, you can check out maps.org for the US side, and then for the organization that I work for, the Canadian arm, you can go to mapscanada.org and find us there. And then on my end, you can find the Flying Sage online or on Instagram at the Flying Sage and theflyingsage.ca. And then myself, you can find me on Instagram, manifestitman, and that's about it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Michael, it's been an awesome conversation. I don't know a lot of this stuff, so this was genuinely a proper, insightful conversation. So thank you for coming.
Of course.
Now, to those of you still listening, thank you so much for making it through all the way to the end of yet another episode of Arreglo Radio. And as always, take it easy, have a good one, be kind to one another. Peace.
We are Arreglo Entertainment, and our podcast Arreglo Radio is a platform where we take a deeper dive into the lives and minds of young professionals in Vancouver. Through engaging and personable conversations with our guests, we gain insight into their professional expertise, ideologies, and really dissect what makes them tick. Our guests come from a wide spectrum of professions, from accountants to makeup artists, musicians to entrepreneurs. We aim to really understand and showcase what drives the next generation of business, social, and community leaders. We believe that providing a more relaxed atmosphere that feels like home, coupled with some light banter, presents the opportunity for better conversations that don't feel staged. Arreglo Entertainment is a group of former international students looking to fully understand Vancouver, its people, and culture. And coming from this perspective, we believe that we are uniquely capable of having these in-depth exploratory conversations.